It's so great to see everybody tonight. Welcome to the Catskill Mountain Country Store in the Overlook. I'm Josh King. I introduced myself earlier. I'm a board member of the Overlook News, a 15-year resident of Windham, and I think a 15-year customer of Drew and Natasha's at the Catskill Mountain Country Store. The most incredible breakfasts and lunches. Thank you for having us. This room works great tonight for an oversubscribed conversation about local journalism. It also has worked great as a movie set. It was the set of Daredevil a couple years ago, a Marvel show, and it's going to be the site of Crashing Through the Snow, an upcoming Christmas movie for Amazon Prime. So Drew and Natasha are renting out their venue, and if you see Amazon Prime around next Christmas, you'll see the Catskill Mountain Country Store. But let's start with having our proprietor, Drew and Natasha, people who represent the type of people covered in the Overlook News, whether you're in Woodstock, New York, or making your way all the way up to Windham, New York, the type of people who are creative, hardworking, visionary, and have provided for my kids for the last 15 years role models of what it means to work hard, to pursue excellence, and to serve other people. Drew and Natasha.
Thank you, Josh. So my husband Drew and I met at the bar at Hunter Mountain in 1989. We started this business 32 years ago.
What was the pickup line?
I said to a friend of mine, who's that beautiful woman over there?
All right.
So we started this business 32 years ago. We raised 3 children in Windham, in the local school. They're very successful. Windham has been very good to our business. The Mountaintop has been very good to us. And we really appreciate everybody braving the cold and coming out here today. But it's also really important. Free press you got to be very brave to want a free press. And today. And we really support what the Overlook is doing, and we support their mission. And we're glad you all came out.
And thank you, everyone, for showing up, and please get your checkbooks out.
Or please get your credit cards out and buy some of Drew and Natasha's amazing banana bread, because everyone's going to get snowed in for a couple days. And the cash register is open, other than the beer and wine and the charcuterie, which is on tables, which is courtesy of Drew and Natasha. This town has just about everything for us and our family, and for so many of my friends who I see around us. One thing that it doesn't have is, if you're anywhere away from the town, an ability to really track what's going on. And that's a reliable, independent, digital news organization. So about a year ago, a bunch of us, including Sue Craig, started thinking, well, what would it take to bring a newspaper to Windham to do something a little different? And we started having a few meetings. We met with people on the mountain. We met with some friends. And one thing that Sue discovered was that just 40 miles south of here in Woodstock, Scott Whitmire and his team were doing exactly what we envisioned at the Overlook. And we started conversations with them, and we realized that the only thing standing in the way of moving from a Facebook page and rumors and gossip and people passing news from one ear to another in a town like this would be to find reporting and journalism talent and base them somewhere between Hunter and Windham, because I look back at Dan and Jen King, and I think between the Hunter and Tannersville communities and the Windham, Ashland, and Jewett communities, there's plenty of stories to go around if we could keep one person busy, talk about all the entrepreneurism, all the education, all the law enforcement and judicial issues, all the real estate issues, everything that's going on in these communities. So that's what prompted us to have conversations with a person who I've got to know over the last few years, an incredible entrepreneur and visionary of journalism, Scott Whitmire.
Josh, thanks so much for the introduction, and thanks to Drew and Natasha for hosting us tonight.
I do want to give a special shout out to Josh. Tonight's event was really his brainchild. A bunch of us sat down and kind of plotted through how to put this together. I want to thank a number of people here tonight. My co-founder is Jackie Callahan, who's right here. Jackie and I started plotting through the idea for the Overlook about 2.5 years ago, and we wanted to bring something to the Catskills that didn't exist. And I think all of us would realize that today we live in a quasi-media desert up here. We really don't have a strong daily newspaper to rely on, and our radio coverage, there's limited coverage. And so what we set out to do, we pulled focus groups together in Hunter and focus groups in Woodstock. Over that period of time, we went out and listened to the community. We wanted to find out what they wanted, what would drive them to a digital site to gain news. And here we are today. We'll celebrate our 1-year anniversary on February 13th. We've got a lot of big plans, for this year. But more than anything, we wanted to really bring these communities together. And this is an example tonight of communities coming together. There are a lot of Windham people here tonight, but there are people spread out from all of our towns here tonight. And we have a lot of donors who've already given to the Overlook that are here tonight. I want to thank them. You have helped us get through this first year brilliantly. We'll come back to you again because community journalism, nonprofit community journalism, relies on the community. And we can't survive without local support. We'll tap into other grant-making organizations for support. And there is good support out there around the United States today. But most of you saw what happened in Pittsburgh 2 weeks ago. The Pittsburgh Post-Gazette has shut down, so Pittsburgh no longer has a daily newspaper, a city that size. So we're like a microcosm of that, and we're trying to make a difference here with the Overlook. We want to be about, as Josh said, we want to be about telling stories, telling your story, telling the stories of your neighbors, reporting on important news, bringing accountability within the communities, and a lot of that is what this panel will cover tonight. In addition to Jackie, we have a couple board members here tonight that I want to single out. Josh is a board member, Lauren Johnson over here is a board member, Amy Scheib in the back is a board member. We thank them. And my partner Alan is here tonight, and actually we give him credit because he's the one that really said, let's call this the Overlook, and then we tested it, and it's like, here we are, the Overlook. So we want to thank everyone for coming out tonight, and I'm going to turn it back to Josh, and then we're going to go ahead with this panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. So, sorry for this time. Known Anthony Scaramucci for about 12 years, before his 11 days serving Donald Trump.
Well, at least he didn't say 10. At least that hurts my feelings.
Anthony's a mutual friend of our dear friend Brian Steele and many of our other friends down in the city, and we got to know each other there. And Anthony said, you know, I've got a place in Windham, and I've had a place in Windham for 20 years. And going to Anthony's place on the mountain, you sort of see his vast library of books, and you realize, you know, what an advocate he is for small bookstores, for reading. The host of The Open Book, Lost Boys, and the rest is Politics US. And he's been, when he wrote one of his previous books, Anthony, I think the prologue talks about the formation of the Catskill Mountains in prehistoric times, how after the Ice Age, the mountains started to form together and create this mountain range that we're sitting in right now. And it's a place that we all call home, and I'm so thrilled that Anthony calls it home from time to time, and that on January 24th, he could call it home for us to join us to talk about the future of news, global and importantly, local. And as I pass the mic to Anthony to introduce our panel, I just sort of lob one question at Anthony, who comes now from 5,000 miles on much higher mountains, the Alps in Davos, Switzerland. How was it? What did you see? What did you learn? Give us a little report.
Anthony Scaramucci.
Yeah, no, introduce.
So I'm gonna just pass the microphone over. I'm gonna let them introduce themselves, then I'll answer that question.
There you go. You gotta hold it close.
All right, is that working?
Yes.
So hello everybody, thanks again, as Scott and everyone else said, for coming out and joining us tonight. My name's Jim Rich, I'm a senior reporter at the Overlook, and this is gonna be really fun.
Hello, everyone. My name is Noah Eckstein. I'm editor-in-chief of the Overlook.
Hi, I'm Susanne Craig. I live over in Maple Crest, and I am on the Overlook board, and I'm an investigative reporter at the New York Times.
And a best-selling author.
And that. Give a good plug for the book.
I'll answer that question real quickly, and then we'll pass the microphone around. The first thing is I'm so thrilled to be here, and if you guys know my ups and downs in my career, I have been ripped up by the press. I have been called everything. I think Bill Maher called me Tony Soprano on the Potomac. I've been called a Jersey Shore cast member. I mean, everything you name it, I've been called it. And despite all that, I am a huge free speech, free press advocate. And people probably wouldn't remember this, but I got in trouble with President Trump because in 2019, I wrote an op-ed for The Hill about free speech. And it basically was an open letter to the president. The press is not the enemy of the people. In fact, one of the things that happens with the press, in addition to holding people in power accountable, is when we teach our children to speak and think freely, they go on and create great companies, in Facebook or Apple Computer, or you pick the company. Countries where free speech is curtailed, their children don't do as well. They don't have the neuroplasticity or the creativity, and frankly, they often have to steal our intellectual property. And so it's not just to hold people accountable, but it's to keep us free, and it's also to keep the economic innovation engine going for the United States. And so I would just say three things about Davos very quickly. Number one, the president tried to steal the show, but I actually think the show went to Mark Carney. And if you have a chance to read, Mark is a little bit of a trivia thing. I started at Goldman Sachs with Mark on the same day. We've been friends for 30 years. He actually came to my wine party that night after his speech. And I would encourage you to just look at the transcript, Google the transcript of his speech, because it's a very clear platform.
There's a lot of you back here. We can't hear.
Yeah, maybe I can get this other microphone, maybe?
I just hold it right to your mouth.
Is it better now? Okay, I'm sorry, I'm getting used to the microphone. So what I would say is that Mark probably stole the day, and I think if you read his speech, that's probably directionally where we need to go if we want to sustain the alliances in Western liberal democracies. Second thing I would say is that there was a large group of people from the administration that came up there to excoriate globalism, and then in a full state of hypocrisy, they were right in the stew of globalism. And so globalism has lifted more people out of poverty, billions of people, than any other system. It gets a very bad rap. And Howard Lutnick was up there talking about the perils of globalism and how it has failed. And yet if you look at the statistics for the United States since 1990, we're excelling in so many different ways. And the most significant thing for me is our percentage of global GDP has gone up 250 basis points in the last 10 years. So it does work for our country. Not that it's perfect, but it does work for our country. And the last thing, and I think the most important thing, is the world is going to reset now as a result of Donald Trump. So if you like him in the room, maybe you like that. If you dislike him, and I certainly have my reasons to dislike him, you don't have enough time here for me to explain why. But if you dislike him, you're going to now see the doctrine of unintended consequences, alliances forming away from the United States, where this America First idea may end up being America alone. And it's just something to think about. Okay, so I'll pass it on to my other panelists, but those are some of my thoughts on Davos.
So we're here today because 45,000 reporting jobs have been lost in the past. Can you hear me? Yeah. Closer? Okay, all right, got it. 3,000 newspapers in the United States have shuttered in the past 20 years. With that, 45,000 reporting jobs have gone away. The Institute for Nonprofit News started about 10 years ago and came together in a room of about 40 people. Now there's about 500 people in that room. You know, nonprofit news has proven to be a resilient model to combat the for-profit news industry's collapse. And so about 11 months ago, a group of people, many of whom are in this room, came together to start the Overlook, which now has about 5,000 subscribers and many more views online. We're a digital weekly that comes out on Friday mornings, and we cover the towns around Overlook Mountain. And what we've seen in the short 11 months is that our neighbors are feeling a greater sense of place and connectivity to their communities and to their neighbors. You know, political accountability, decisions are being made in town government and being scrutinized by our paper. Our mission is to inform and empower people to make the best decisions in their lives. And it's really an honor for me to be the founding editor-in-chief and to be amongst you all, so thank you.
I just want to say, first of all, Noah, and hopefully you guys will get to know him, either to meet him tonight or to get to know some of his stories, but what the Overlook has done is just incredible, and it's been done for the most part by just a handful of people. And one of the reasons we're here tonight is because we want to expand and cover the Windham area, whether it's Windham proper or some of the other communities. And our goal is to get a reporter in the community. I don't know if that reporter's going to have a storefront, but they might, and just to come and cover the news, whether it's a business opening or looking at some of the things with the mountain and what's going on there. There's been a lot of just so much activity in town that it's amazing how it either goes not covered or undercovered, or sometimes there's just misinformation or disinformation put out on social media. I think the Friends of Windham Mountain is a great Facebook group. I know a lot of people either belong to that or belong to something similar in their community, and it serves a great purpose, but it can also be a breeding ground for rumors about stuff that's just not true. Noah and I it was funny, we were talking about some stories to do, and I had seen on one of the Facebook posts that there's going to be a traffic stop coming to town, and I said to Noah, that could be a really great story, and we started looking into it. It took us about 5 minutes to realize that probably wasn't happening, but that's just the sort of thing you see over and over and over. So I think I'm just really excited about this, and I hope tonight, hopefully with the support of financial support from a lot of you and other support, just in terms of news tips and letting us know stuff, that we can really get this going. I just think it's going to be really exciting.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sue. And the Overlook right now in terms of full-time reporters is myself and the wonderful Jim Rich. So I'll let Jim speak.
I wasn't expecting such a wonderful setup. Is this on? I don't feel like it is. It's not.
Use his.
Anyway, so thank you. I'll just say this. So I've been at this long enough where I remember the first wave of this concept that citizen journalism was going to supplant traditional journalism. And I'm going to run the risk of sounding like a cranky old man here, but I think that is what we've seen, the results of that assumption and the flaws in that assumption within the last decade. And we talk about misinformation, and I think there's a really important context to this. In journalism, we've all been trained, right? The same as you would if you were a plumber or if you were a carpenter. And this is the thing that is really important, and I think that gets missed when we have these sort of conversations. We were taught that there are the 5 W's, right? The who, what, when, where, and why, and sometimes we would think about how. But to me, and we were talking about this last week, why is the most important of those 5 W's, and that is the question that goes unanswered most frequently when you have news deserts. People will get information. They'll figure out the what is happening. They'll figure out the when. They may even figure out the how. But it's the why. And the why is the really difficult question to answer. And if you extrapolate it out to, well, why are we here? Why is there only life on Earth? Why this? Why that? You realize why it's a difficult question to answer, but that's where professional journalism comes in, and that's why it's so important. And again, I run the risk of sounding not only cranky but corny here. It's something that it's been my North Star as a journalist. And I think what Noah and Scott and Sue and everyone else that was mentioned here earlier tonight, what they've started at the Overlook is really just truly fantastic. And it needs to be replicated in as many areas of this country as we possibly can.
Noah, can you talk to us a little bit about the last 11 months and some of the success stories that you've had, and some of the feedback that you've gotten from the community about the growth of the Overlook?
Yeah, absolutely. We issued a reader survey where people were just saying, we want more. Thank you so much for giving us accurate news and to know what's going on. I mean, an example of this was John Barry, who's one of our reporters here tonight. He broke a story about Bearsville Center going up for sale, which was a huge moment for us. Our role is really, it's breaking news, but it's also deeper dives. And I think one thing I'm really proud of over the past year is some of our cultural profiles that we've done, which really we spend time with artists and people in our communities that you run into at the coffee shops to learn more about them and who they are. And that, to go back to what Jim was saying, I'm not seeing that so much in other regional news outlets. And I think that we are poised to become a preeminent Catskills outlet because of that question of why, and digging deeper and figuring out the systems at play that work, that go beyond the story of a town government. But so back to your question, we're hyper local with regional. So we're covering the zoning board, the planning board, the town board, but we're also covering what's happening in town.
Can I give you one of my favorite stories? I want you to talk about it, and that's why we ended up chatting. I reached out to him because I'd seen this story on title theft, and because they do a lot, and a lot of you guys do so much just daily, and then you've also taken some time out to do some longer stories that I think affected some people in the community. It was just a great example of the reach that you have. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was a story about land deed theft, where people who owned land in Woodstock but didn't live in Woodstock found out that their land was sold fraudulently from under them. Someone came in and fraudulently copied their passports, and there was a sale. So this is something that is happening a lot, something to be worried about, and we were able to report on that, and the county executive saw it and was able to raise some awareness about it. Similarly with Jim's coverage of the Boyceville water situation, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, oops, that was a little too loud. So the thing that I've noticed about the Overlook's coverage is reminiscent to me of when I first started in the business, which is about 25, 26 years ago. There wasn't quite the political divisiveness that we're experiencing throughout our country and communities, and while people still would get pissed at the press, there was the understanding that Anthony mentioned earlier, as far as there was a respect for it. I'm seeing that now in every community that I report on up here. Republican, Democrat, the politics, at least up to this point, have not gotten in the way of sort of the idea that, hey, we really appreciate that you're even here focusing on what's going on in our towns because it's been so long. So the story that Noah referenced was a very small group of residents in Boyceville, which is a hamlet in the town of Olive. About 75 of them had gone without water for nearly a month because their water company was basically negligent and incompetent. And this is an issue that had not made its way up to county legislators or any public officials. Really, there wasn't much awareness of it. So the reporting got action, which is an old term that Lauren knows we used to joke about at the Daily News, and that's invaluable. And again, I don't really want to focus on the accountability, because that is a huge part of it, but there's just so much other information. And again, I go back to the explanatory aspect of, well, why is this happening, or why is this not happening in our community? And answering those questions has been the thing that I feel people have appreciated the most.
a question for you, Susan, if you don't mind. So you've got a storied career in journalism, worked for the New York Times, other outlets. Tell us about slice it for us from the local community journalist all the way up to the national journalist, and just tell us the importance of each layer of journalism.
Sure. I think a lot of you know, and we're seeing it play out. You mentioned the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette earlier is closed. You're hearing more layoffs coming from the Washington Post, and they're cutting back on their Olympic coverage, and they're going through a lot. It seems like every week or two we're hearing stories like that. I feel very fortunate to work at the New York Times. They're sort of in an opposite spot. We keep joking there's going to be a day where the analysts who cover the New York Times are going to call it a puzzle cooking and news company. They've really managed to, the New York Times has really managed to kind of thread this, but we're really at a place that we're a survivor and we're thriving, but so many other places aren't. And what's been interesting to watch as this has gone on, because there's just been so many places that have closed. I started, I'm a Canadian, thanks for the Mark Carney comments. But I started my career at the Calgary Herald, and it was my local paper. I went to university there. And I always remember one of my first assignments when I got there was I showed up to cover City Hall, and it was packed. There were so many reporters there. And I went back recently and I went down to City Hall, and there was nobody. There was like one reporter covering City Hall, and the two papers, they were great rivals, the Calgary Herald and the Calgary Sun. So much so, one of my jobs as a summer student at the Calgary Herald was to show up at the Calgary Sun and get their papers. It was coming off the press. They've now merged, and they have one reporter writing copy for both papers. So it's real across Canada and the United States, just the and I think around the world, just the lack of news coverage. But what's been really heartening about this and about the last few years is that's been going on. These nonprofit news organizations have really stepped into the breach. I don't think they can replace them, but it is incredible to see how many communities are now being served by newspapers like the Overlook, and people are supporting it, and it's been really something to sort of watch that and now to be part of it.
Can I add something to that?
We also talked about this last week, and so for those of you who don't know, I was the former New York Daily News editor-in-chief. Lauren Johnson and I worked there for years, and one of the things that I felt was important about the dynamic between the layers, the levels of journalism that Anthony described is, you hear the theory of trickle-down economics. Well, in journalism, it's trickle-up. And so the smaller, and again, having worked at smaller papers before I got to the Daily News, one of the thorns that would stick in my side was you would do this great work, you'd break stories, not everybody would see it, and then a larger publication would swoop in and sort of cannibalize it a little bit. And so that would be frustrating, but that's a really important function of that dynamic. And when you lose that middle level of journalistic outlets, you lose that. And so that hurts the larger outlets as well, because there's a funneling process that goes on there. And so I like to think that the Overlook is sort of helping to repair that a little bit.
I do think some of the greatest stories that we cover, even like at the Times, but you're right, like so much of it bubbles up. But even the Metro coverage of the New York Times or the Washington Post, I always remember that Watergate started as a Metro story at the Washington Post because there was good people, there was beat reporters on the job, and they were just seeing stuff. They were on the beat, and wherever the beat is, it does start there. It's been really heartening to see the Albany Times Union, which I'm a regular reader of, is often crediting the Overlook. It just shows the impact that it's having because there's just people on the ground. It's not AI, it's not being ripped from somewhere else. These are real reporters and they're out in the community.
I think we view community journalism as essential civic infrastructure for the public good. And as we ask for money, that isn't just a donation, it's very much a buy-in to be part of a reader-supported newspaper for everyone. Those are our tenets that are like a real calling. So,
I'm going to tell you one more thing.
One last thing to that point. It's an investment, and it's an investment in democracy, which again sounds corny, but there have been studies done that where there are news deserts and those communities suffer from on a municipality level where they overspend, the services decline. So this isn't a fantasy, this isn't a hypothetical, this is happening throughout our country right now. And that's the side effect.
I don't mean to interrupt your flow, but as long as you're talking about nonprofits, investments, flows, I just have a. God, I didn't mean that. As long as they were talking about investments and stuff, and we're going to write checks and support this, some of us have like donor advised funds and other stuff. Are you like a nonprofit 501c3?
Yep.
So
Scott, why don't you talk to that?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
No,
your flow.
no,
As long as
We're about to take questions from everybody, so it's good time.
I'm sorry.
No, we want to take questions.
So we are set up as a 501c3, so any contribution is tax deductible. You can also do. Okay, we're a 501c3, so all contributions are tax deductible. We accept appreciated stock, so we can take funds that way, and we also take funds through donor advised funds. And we have quite a few of those donors in the room tonight, and again, thank you so very much.
Anthony, Brendan, some questions.
Yeah, why don't we take questions from the audience? I think it's a good time to do that. Don't be bashful. Gotta be questions.
Guys,
Sports, religion, politics, something.
I'm not sure I'll take that big, but no. I firstly, I live here, and I'm an ex-journalist also, and I wanted to thank you. Really, I wasn't expecting to hear such advocacy for community and local journalism. I just wanted to add to your story. My career started in community news, and I ended up here in the United States as a editor for the Times of London. But that one story, to speak to your point, I wrote a story 150 years ago because some local, recently immigrant businessmen.
was it about Mitch McConnell? Because he was probably in the Senate.
No, I'll come to you later, actually. We've crossed paths before, I'll tell you what. But perhaps over a drink. But no, in all seriousness, I was a junior reporter, Birmingham Weekly News, not even the Daily News. Or, you know. These guys put a couch outside my house. It was a notorious red light district. I was an ex-student, that's where we all lived. Anyway, point is, these guys were taking back the streets. You know, they were business owners. They were trying to gentrify, as we would say now, the neighborhood, and nobody cared because they were Bangladeshi guys. They were a small business community, and we wrote the story in our local paper, just saying these guys were preventing prostitutes from working in this neighborhood. And the day after we published it, the BBC were on the phone, the Guardian were on the phone, the Times were on the phone. For the story, it went national. It was a huge deal. The revitalization of this neighborhood around the University of Birmingham, UK, happened almost overnight, and everybody cared. From a personal perspective, I ended up working for the Times almost immediately. So the role of community journalism, and to go to your cranky old man point, I'm sorry, I'm making this rather long-winded. I find myself thinking, well, why isn't this story being told? It's because the outlets on the ground in the community don't exist anymore. And so to have that here in our community is of vital importance, and I think the more people that get involved in it, the better. So I don't have a question, but I do want to thank you for doing that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Why don't we take some questions? Maybe some questions in the back. Yes, sir.
Are there any stories at Windham that you're thinking of right now?
Talk about the things
Sure.
you've done for.
You know, I'm actually working on a story about the Main Street Community Center and all the amazing work that they do to provide kids who come from economically disadvantaged families with food on the weekends. And you know, they have a 3D printer and a laser printer. Just amazing, you know, how a community center steps in. We did a story about Hensonville. We did a story about the lovely Dawn Kojak, Dawn to Dusk. Yes, essential part of the community. So yeah, we're excited to. The idea is, if we can fundraise to hire a full-time reporter, we are going to be covering Windham fully, which is very exciting.
One of the exciting things too about that is I hope we're going to be going to the town meetings and we're going to be bearing witness to that sort of thing as well. It's really important that we do, looking both at the businesses and this I always think about progress and how much progress is going on in Windham. It's covering that, but also covering some of the challenges of that. But you have to be in the community to see it and to live it and to talk to the business owners, and I think that that's where we're coming from.
And I think also, you know, this is a bit of an aside, but we talked about misinformation and AI. My 92-year-old aunt sent me a video on Instagram that was a cat feeding a baby. And she thought it was real, and it got me thinking, not only are we covering news, but there is also, you know, ways for us to partner with Windham Ashland Jewett School so that young kids are able to learn media literacy and subscribe to a local free news outlet. Yeah.
Really smart. Yes, there's a question in the back.
What's the current demographic of readership and how is that being tracked? With that as well, what are the current plans for outreach, particularly for local readership? I'm looking around the room and I think this as a resident who was born here, raised here, went away for a while, came back. But I know so many of the beautiful faces in this room and I recognize them. And this isn't a jab at the fact that there's not as many local faces here. I would like to see what's the outreach plan for that and demographics. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. It's a great question. One thing that we did when we started, so right now the Overlook covers Woodstock, Saugerties, Hunter, Hurley, Olive, and Shandaken. And one thing we did was we advertised online and, you know, on flyers in the town, and we had community listening sessions at the library, something that we would plan to do, you know, here. And so that is a good way to get the word out. In terms of demographic, we have data on who these people are, you know, their age and where they live. That's the extent of that.
And is there a particular age group that, like, is there a range? Is there a majority reader? Just curious.
Majority, everyone is like 35 and older. So we're skewing older, we're skewing white. I think that's because, you know, 98% of the people in our towns that we cover are white. So we're thinking about diversity actively. We have a diversity policy and thinking about how to get out to the locals. It's top of mind.
I would just reference something that Sue said earlier, which is important part of this outreach is something that's done just by doing the job. And that's showing up at the board meetings. That's meeting the officials, that's meeting the residents who are speaking, who have concerns at these board meetings, whether it's a town board, a zoning board, a planning board. So that to me is the greatest form of outreach because it's organic. And so hopefully that answers your question.
Hey, Noah, just let folks here know how they can be in touch in terms of if they have story ideas. Also, you take a lot of opinion pieces, perspective pieces, how they can support the work of the Overlook.
Yeah, so it's the overlooknews.com. Free to access the website. You'll be prompted when you go on to sign up to our newsletter, which is a Friday morning newsletter. We update the site in the week with news, but everything is sort of templed around the Friday newsletter. But it's the overlooknews.com.
And there's sheets on it.
Yes, and there are sheets on the table for you to sign up, and we'll add your email, and there are cards that list the website.
I think somebody I mentioned this before, but I do think one of the great things about the paper is you get it Friday mornings in your inbox. You can go online and check it out, but it's there. We want to come to where people are because there is coverage in Windham right now, but it's, you know, a hard copy paper, or maybe you have to have the radio on. And I think that what's great about this is we're trying to meet people where they are.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
A philosophical question. You talked about freedom of speech, and I guess how do you balance objective reporting, tough reporting, without biting the hand that feeds you? It's tough at the national level. You see, you know, very specific types of coverage. Stories are avoided for, you know, reasons to do with advertisers sometimes. How do you do that at the local? How do you avoid doing that at the local level?
I think back to Chomsky's manufacturing consent and the propaganda model when it comes to corporate media and how they're beholden to advertisers and corporate interests. Nonprofit news, that's not the case. we're beholden to our readers because they're our main funders. Advertising is really, really small amount of our revenue, and it is largely community mom and pop ads. So we have editorial independence. Our board is the strategic fundraising driver of the organization, and each week they don't know the stories that are happening. You know, we accept tips and stories from anybody in the community, but there's a clear firewall between the board and editorial.
I would just add a quick comment on that. As someone who had to deal with the exact dynamic that you're describing there, as far as those pressures with economic and advertising dollars, when it runs square up against what is the right thing to do as far as covering a story. In the Daily News, we spent a year investigating what eventually led to the passing of the Child Victims Act in New York State. And during that year, we scrutinized a lot of what the Archdiocese of New York was doing on this front, and a lot of the abuse that was being swept under the rug. They had a $1 million plus printing contract with the Daily News because the Daily News had a printing plant in New Jersey. They threatened to and then follow through on pulling that contract because we would not bend with our coverage. So there are plenty of examples where the outlets do bend, but to me it comes down to the simple sort of saying that, you know, the right thing is the hardest thing to do, but you still got to do it. And so I think that that's what happens here at the Overlook. You know, we have less of the pressure economically, as Noah points out, but at the end of the day, it really shouldn't even matter. And I know that sounds pie in the sky, but it's true.
And I just want to add, because we are a nonprofit, we do not take a stand in political races. So we're very, we do not endorse candidates. A lot of our towns just went through town elections. We don't endorse any of those candidates. We cover them. If a presidential race is coming up in 2028, we're going to cover the folks that are running and campaigning here, but we do not do political endorsements.
Don't say if presidential. let's pray. When.
Yeah. So you wouldn't endorse Trump in 2028.
Just to follow on from that, I just wanted to ask, and this is a question very much in the spirit of support of you. You raise a very good point. It's all well and good not having a commercial block to your investigations, but do you have legal protection? I'm not a journalist now, I was for 30 years, but I worked on a story when I moved here to prevent what was clearly a fraudulent company who were claiming to be able to turn garbage into free electricity. And several towns up here had agreed that that was a good idea and that they should pay them lots of money to build that factory. I gathered evidence to prove that it was literally garbage and presented it to the local newspaper. And they wouldn't and couldn't print it. We got rid of the company, but the newspaper wouldn't print it, although they've already threatened to sue us twice and we can't afford to see them off. So how do you see yourself if you end up in that position?
We have media liability insurance, and for stories like that, we also partner with lawyers for reporters, which they review. I mean, they can't guarantee that we wouldn't be sued, but they can review our copy and get back to us with comments on language and things like that.
It is I'm sorry. It is a fantastic question, and it literally is probably the third question that I asked Noah upon meeting him and talking to him about working with him, because exactly what you said. I know from experience that if you're doing the job right, you're going to get sued, and so yeah. But that's a huge problem right now in the landscape because a lot of companies just cannot afford what essentially are punitive lawsuits. And so I've experienced it. I've been involved in it. I see Kai Falkenberg in the back. I worked with her at Geo Media, and that is certainly an issue that we dealt with constantly.
Other questions? Josh, do you want to? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
I work for Turner Broadcasting for 10 years. I worked for Turner Broadcasting for 10 years, never with a microphone in my hand.
found out, and I was in the broadcasting business for about 30 years, what I found out is that what the business depends on is content and distribution. And I look, and there's this diminution, in my view, of both content, unique content, and distribution. Distribution is a whole different topic now than it was 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. The fact that you're looking for a particular demographic, women 18 to 34, men 25 to 54, et cetera, et cetera. These are Nielsen audiences, if you will. That's gone beyond the boards. It's so easy to reach somebody through the internet, paid, unpaid, it doesn't matter, that journalism, and this is my view, and it's not a prejudiced view, but journalism has become, I worked for CNN for 10 years, and I used to tell them that it's the cable news network, what we're coming across as the cable truth network, but not to the extent we should. It was all going after that audience, and the programming mirrored that audience. It wasn't just commercials, it was programming, getting huge numbers as far as the audience was concerned. So my question is, how is that combated? Many times it's no longer content and distribution. Many times it's gossip over the same thing. I am waiting for somebody to put some sort of a limit on the Trump baloney that's just repeated in journalism over and over and over again. And it's all the same. It's all the same. This ship, now this is my opinion, this ship is sinking. And it's really taken on the water quickly. And we just look at the President of the United States, who can't put two sentences together, who knows absolutely zero about geography, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Can we work on a formula that nullifies that? It's sort of like, and I understand it perfectly, it's like a knee-jerk reaction. This is news. Well, it's not news anymore. It's like, I say to myself, this is like going to the supermarket and not picking up the New York Times, or not picking up Overlook, but picking up the National Enquirer to get my news, because it's all the National Enquirer. How do we overcome that? How do we educate a population is really what it comes down to. I mean, we see what's happening with doing away with the Department of Education. I mean, I grew up in the 40s, and you couldn't even imagine a government wanting to do something like that. So that's enough out of me. Thank you.
You know, I would say that if you visit our website, it will give you some hope, because our content.
I'm looking for that.
Yes, it really does, because it gives me hope. I feel that too. You know, the headlines in the national news. It's like, what can you do as one person living in the Catskills? It makes you feel just so distant from people. But what we're doing is helping connect people with good information to their neighbors, and for there to be a greater sense of place and community with the people that we live around.
And I think with the framework of some real professionals that are getting involved in it, because it does, I hear you. I spent 10 years of my life writing. Yeah, I was just going to say, I empathize with what you're saying. I spent 10 plus years of my life looking into Donald Trump's finances in his life, and I learned very quickly that a lie, passed down into history, eventually becomes truth. And in that book, our goal, and we went back and we looked at, it was a narrative about his life, but everything that we looked at, we examined it with the assumption that it may be wrong, because he lived in this ether in the 1980s that wasn't really journalism, it was entertainment, it was Page 6, and he was able to control the narrative, and most of what he said during those years was a lie about his finances and a lot of other things. And it's really it's frustrating, but I think you just do it sentence by sentence and statement by statement, and just have really good people on the job, and that's what we're trying to do here, and what we're sort of the rigor that we hope to bring to this. And call us if something's not right, because we're here, we're on the ground.
Before I turn it back to Josh, I want to address that a little, if that's okay. So I'm going to say something more meta and less specific than what Sue said, and that is about the country and our history. If you just step back, we seem to have these 80-year periods of time where we get dunked, and then we have this massive reflection and then renewal. So we start out in 1776, 80 years later, we end up in a great civil war. 80 years after that, we're in the Great Depression, which actually leads to 2 wars, because the First World War, we screwed up the treaty, so we ended up with the Second World War. And now, unfortunately, we're 80 years out again from that post-World War II order, which has led to such great peace and great prosperity. And there's angst in the country. And so if you just look at it from that perspective, weirdly, I think Trump represents something that's going to cost us something, but it's also going to create a crisis and a renewal in the country in a way where we'll rebound greater than ever before. There's just too many good people in this country. There's too many great things that are happening, from economic prosperity, great journalism, and I think this will be a pivot point. People are going to look back on this and say, okay, wow, we got this wrong, but we're a near perfect union. We're going to make it more perfect, and just go back and look at those 80-year cycles, and I think it'll give you a lot of hope and optimism.